Yes, living with KS. Yeah, living with KS.
So we are back for our second video. Again with
That was
another
a lit intro.
opening with another musical selection by none other than Mr. Chris Page. So in this second video, we don't necessarily have an update. For those who have gone through this fertility journey, you know that it truly is a journey. Like, that word is used for a reason. We have been on this journey now since about February of this year, and we mentioned that in our previous video. And in May of this year, Chris was diagnosed with Klinefelter Syndrome. And so this video is going to focus more so on Klinefelter Syndrome and what we know about Klinefelter Syndrome. And in no way are we saying we're experts on Klinefelter Syndrome. We just wanted to come on here and make a video about it and share our experience, because what we noticed is that we were hitting roadblocks. And what I mean by that is, when you're going through this fertility journey, you often try to find hope in other success stories. And so as we have researched Klinefelter Syndrome and joined communities of those with Klinefelter Syndrome on social media, we're not feeling like we're seeing people who look like us or share our story. And by look like us, we're not talking about race. We just mean in regards to where Chris is with Klinefelter Syndrome. So what we are seeing a lot of is a lot of material for parents who have just had a child born and diagnosed with Klinefelter Syndrome, or we're seeing adult males who have been living with Klinefelter Syndrome for a certain amount of years, discussing like testosterone supplements and replacements and their experience with that. Also, they're discussing how they are infertile. And in our case, we are not infertile, or more so I should say Chris is not infertile. Our doctor has not told us that. Instead, Chris will be having a microtesty surgery done in August of this year in order to see if there is viable sperm, so that we can continue with our journey of trying to conceive a biological baby. But just going back to Klinefelter Syndrome, also known as KS or XXY, Chris is going to take it away and he's going to share his experience with Klinefelter Syndrome. And again, like I said, his experience with Klinefelter Syndrome, not what we have found about Klinefelter Syndrome.
Yeah, so for the first thing, Klinefelter Syndrome, or XXY, is referred to that because of the 47th chromosome that we take on. But my experience, KS, you typically see a bunch of different symptoms, but I thought I was pretty normal until the test. I never even knew I had KS, didn't think nothing of it. There's some symptoms that kind of align, like low muscle mass or poor oral health, which I've had for the longest time. Then you look at that and think like, okay, maybe I do have KS, right? But yeah, I've been living a normal lifestyle, so I didn't really realize I had it until the genetics testing, like majority of the people. So
yeah, and so like Chris is, mentioning, when we looked at adults of childbearing age, but I think people use that in terms of women. But when we looked at adults who, were talking about their journey to have children, they mentioned that they were either on the donor sperm route or on the adoption route because they had been deemed at some point infertile. And when it comes to Chris's case, although he has Klinefelter Syndrome, and it affects, I think they said 1 in 600 babies in the U.S. are born with Klinefelter Syndrome a year, so it's often considered rare. However, what I read on one of the blogs was that Klinefelter Syndrome might not be as rare as people think, but in the case of adult males, unless you are experiencing some of those more severe, for lack of a better word, symptoms, you're not going to know that you have Klinefelter syndrome.
Exactly.
So if Chris and I were not trying to conceive and we never went to the doctor and said, hey, we're having trouble conceiving, and they said, let's do blood work and genetic testing, we wouldn't have known that Chris has Klinefelter syndrome. Because like you mentioned, he's not one that has to take testosterone supplements or replacements. And although he has some of the other symptoms that align with KS, it was nothing that was necessarily messing with his day-to-day.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why we're recording this video, is to show that there is a wide spectrum for those living with KS. And so if your significant other is diagnosed with Klinefelter syndrome and you are on this journey to have a baby, if you go and research, you know, you might feel as if you only have the donor sperm or the adoption route, but we're here to say that there are people living with KS that are on this fertility journey to have biological children through things such as like the microtesty surgery. And so for us, we are continuing to have hope in regards to being able to find sperm on August 4th during Chris's microtesty surgery. And we haven't even, we're like jumping, haven't even really connected the dots between Klinefelter syndrome and Chris's microtesty. So those with Klinefelter syndrome, if you do quick searches, it'll tell you that people living with KS either have low sperm or no sperm.
Yes.
In Chris's case, we had 2 semen analysis results that we've discussed in our first video that came back showing that he had no sperm, basically meaning that in the ejaculate, there was no sperm seen. That is literally what the results said. No sperm seen.
Blanks.
Yes, as Chris likes to say, shooting blanks. And so in his case, the doctor basically said, okay, since we know that you have Klinefelter syndrome, we are going to basically say that you have non-obstructive azoospermia. Basically meaning that after, I believe it's 2 no sperm seen semen analysis results, you are then diagnosed with what they call azoospermia, basically meaning no sperm. From there, it can either be obstructive or non-obstructive. In Chris's case, it was non-obstructive. So he had a physical exam, and during the physical exam, they did not see any sort of blockage.
Yeah.
And we talk more about that in the first video. And so non-obstructive azoospermia, also you can see it as NOA. There are a lot of acronyms in this fertility journey.
A bunch.
We now know the cause for that, and that is the fact that Chris has Klinefelter syndrome. And so because we would like to exhaust all of our options in regards to being able to conceive a biological baby, we are going through with what is called a microtesty surgery. And basically what that is going to be, Chris is going to have a procedure in which they are, you okay?
Yeah.
In which they are going to do a small incision in both of his testes, and they are going to look for sperm. And they are going to pull out the sperm that they see, and from there, prayerfully, we'll be able to continue with our IVF journey. So ICSI with IVF, basically just meaning a lot of things are going to be happening outside of the body before the embryo is then implanted. Am I missing anything?
No. You nailed it on the head.
Yes. And so as you all continue to follow our journey, we just, again, wanted to jump back very quickly to Klinefelter syndrome and just say that we are continuing to share our story in hopes of being a support system for others and showing others that Klinefelter syndrome diagnosis does not have to be end all. So there are people living with KS that are not going to be like what you see on your quick Google search. There are people living with KS who don't even know that they're living with KS. And this is not to scare anybody, but just another reason why we started recording our journey is because we're really big on sharing that infertility and this fertility journey is not female. It carries no gender.
Yes.
And so if you are struggling to get pregnant and you are thinking about going to seek help through a fertility clinic, don't allow anyone to have the man sit on the sidelines. Push for, testing, push for the semen analysis, push for the genetic testing, because if we didn't, I would have went through a full fertility workup and could have easily been diagnosed with basically not knowing what our cause is for infertility, because all of my testing has been coming back saying that I'm an ovary achiever. I like saying that. And again, this is just, we would have hit a roadblock, I guess you can say, if we did not have a doctor that was like, no, fertility has no gender. So we're going to ensure that you all are being tested alongside each other.
Yes.
So thank you for watching our video. If you want to know or learn more about the beginning of our fertility journey, so when we started trying to get pregnant and what led us to our fertility clinic, we have our previous video that pretty much discusses that up until the diagnosis of Chris's Klinefelter Syndrome. And then we'll be back with a second video because next week gets a little exciting.
Yes.
Next week, we finally will be able to sit down with my doctor. And I just want to shout out Chris. He has had a cold all week. We've been trying to sit down to record this video. And he's pushing through today just because, again, we want to keep you all updated on where we are. So thank you for sitting here and coughing it out with me. But yes, next week on Monday, we're going to sit down with my doctor. And you'll hear me say a lot, my doctor, Chris's doctor. We are at a clinic in which Chris is under a urologist, and then I'm under what they just said, a fertility specialist. And they are working alongside each other since we are dealing with male factor infertility that involves me having to go through the IVF process. And we'll get my results next week in regards to my workup to see, if we're good to go with IVF and what that will look like for us. And then we also get to sit down with the genetics testing. We saw the results. We don't understand the results. So
a bunch of words.
Right. So we're not even going to jump in it on this video. But since we are going along with IVF, we do get to learn a lot about each other next week on Wednesday in regards to our genetic makeup. So we just want to thank you all again for joining us, and we will be back next week with another update.
Yes, don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share.
Yes, definitely. Please share. Unfortunately, a lot of people go through infertility and they feel very alone. And we just want to continue to show people that, you can share your story or you can find hope in other people's stories. So again, thank you for watching.